Hello, and welcome to Insightful Conversations with your host, Three Principles practitioner, Adey-Jones. Join her each week as she welcomes some of the world's leading Three Principles teachers and practitioners who share how this understanding has dramatically improved the quality of their lives and the lives of those they work with.
I'm very excited to have Julie Stuart and retired Major Brad Gallup with me. Julie and Brad are both transformative coaches who often include horses in their coaching. They founded Oakley Ranch in Kelseyville, California, on creating a community sanctuary to guide individuals into new possibilities. They're also starting up a non-profit Warrior Discovery Project to offer hope and healing to warriors, first responders, and individuals with post-traumatic stress, grief and loss, and moral injury. Welcome, Julie and Brad. Thank you so much for joining us on the show today. And before we start, Brad, I just want to thank you for your service. I know that you have served in a couple of different areas. You're a Marine, and what else?
Yep, I was an enlisted Marine, yep. And then I was also an Air Force officer. So I had a total of 21 years in service between the two branches.
Yeah, well, that's wonderful. Thank you. So what brought you, I just would love to find out, well, number one, what brought you together, but did you come together through the principles, or did you both have exposure to it before?
No, we met actually just 3 years ago when we were both attending Michael Neal's Super Coach Academy, and we formed a pretty quick connection at the first week of the program. And we started off long distance. I was living in Oakland, California, and Brad was living in Michigan, and we slowly or quickly, depending on how you look at it, moved our way to finding a home together in Kelseyville, California.
That's beautiful. You followed your wisdom. Clearly, it was pointing you in the right direction.
Yep, it was.
It was. So both of you came across the principles 3 years ago, but were you coaching beforehand? Because I know that you've both done other coaching programs. Is that right?
Yeah, I have. I've been coaching since I think 2005, and I've done. I think I now have 4 official certifications for different coaching programs.
Mm-hmm. Now, was some of that equine therapy before, or that's something since the principles?
For me, that's since the principles. For Brad, it was before. I've always had an interest in horses, and that was actually one of the draws when I met Brad. He said horse, and I was like, huh? So,
yeah.
But Brad has a longer history with horses, so I can tell you about that.
Yeah. And I started my work back probably in, not around horses, but I started my own kind of personal work back in 92 when I got back from the Gulf War, and was really struggling. In fact, almost kind of took my life. So I ended up going into therapy, and then I ended up finding the Men's Leadership Alliance out of Boulder, Colorado, and I went through their leadership initiation workshop training, and ended up staffing their work. And then in 97, I started working with the Tragedy Assistance Program for Survivors, which is called TAPS, which is out of Washington, D.C., and we work with military families that have lost somebody, looking at survivors. And I started working on the teams with teenagers that had been survivors and lost somebody. And that led to me getting more facilitation skills and then coaching. And in 98, I came across my teacher, both of our teacher, Ariana Strauzy, who was doing something called Horses in Leadership. And that was about the time I was 40. And so I started doing that work back then.
Wow. And so I'm not a horsey person. Doesn't mean I have anything against them, but what is it about working with horses that is, I know it's being used for many, many years and has had incredible results. So what exactly is it about, especially with things like post-traumatic stress disorder or any type of trauma, that working with a horse, how does that work together?
Yeah. I mean, one way I could just describe it is how my own experience when I first did it in 95, I was down in Tucson, Arizona, and I went through a program at Sierra Tucson, in which had a full day of equine, which I'd never heard of before. And I went through that experience, and what I actually ended up doing was the instructor had me lay across the horse like a saddle would lay across the horse and just rest on the horse. And I had this amazing way amazing wall of grief come through me.
Wow.
And I had no idea where it came from. And I spent like 15 minutes on that horse just wailing, and the horse never moved.
Wow.
And when I slid off the back of the horse, I felt like 20 pounds had been lifted off my shoulder. And I just said, I want to do this work. And so we find that with horses, especially the work we kind of do, that you have to really be grounded in the present moment. And that's where when we can get people to just go into a horse at liberty, which means the horse is loose without a halter on in a 50-foot round pen, then all of a sudden you have to be very much in the present. You're not in the past or in the future.
Yeah.
And then that moment right there, things magically start to happen. And we just start working with the principles right there.
Wow. Now, what happens if in that moment there is fear? What happens then?
You know, it usually comes up before we put them in the round pen.
Oh, okay.
We do some exercises just trying to keep grounding them, getting back through the breath, getting back in their bodies. But we know that the horses, because the electromagnetic field that comes off their hearts is the equivalent, can almost reach a distance of up to a half mile.
Wow.
And Heart Math Institute has actually shown that within 5 to 7 minutes, if I can get a person just close enough, you don't have to even be next to the horse. If I get close enough, already the electromagnetic repairing from the heart actually slows them up, their heartbeat down about 25%.
Wow, that's incredible. I love it when science backs up what we intuitively know.
Exactly. Yeah. And at some point within the next 7 to 12 minutes, their heart rate will actually synchronize up. Every other beat will actually synchronize up. And so at that point, when the horses, people start feeling, even they got a lot of fear, they'll start to relax. And we just keep pointing them back to the wisdom. Yeah. And then, like we say in the work, we're off to the races.
Mm-hmm. No, that's wonderful. So tell me about Oakley Ranch. How did that, is that something that either one of you lived up before or you found it? Tell me the history of that.
I'll try to tell you the condensed version.
Yes.
It's really interesting. It's many things since Brad and I've met have just fallen into a big synchronicity of things just have been unfolding. And if we keep opening up our eyes, they do. And this Oakley Ranch is one of those things where the shortest version I can do in the moment is that, you know, I'd been introduced to a woman in Oakland who also does equine work similar to Brad. And we were in a conversation with her. We were looking at ranches. We talked about this town called Kelseyville that we saw one, and she said, I grew up in Kelseyville. So she introduced us to her mother, big names in the community, introduced us to a ton of other people. We kept looking at other ranches. And the shortest version would be that hence now we ended up in this woman, Stephanie's grandmother's house. So it was for sale by an owner in between the grandmother and where we are now. But we just landed in a community that welcomed us with open arms in Kelseyville. And the property is 20 acres studded with oaks. It's really beautiful. And we're working on, we've put in a round pen for the horses, and we've put in a walking labyrinth for meditation. And we're working on fundraising for getting a barn built and slowly transforming it into a sanctuary and community retreat center. So it's been a big project.
I know it's a big project. And I know that you have a GoFundMe page right now, because I know that you want to build a barn and you have horses waiting to move into the barns already. So we've got to get those barns built.
Yeah, that's exactly right. One of the people that Stephanie's mom introduced us to was Kirk Andrus and Quincy Andrus, who was Quincy is a well-known horse person in Kelseyville and had been around the area for years and years and years. And both her and Kirk fell in love with the work we wanted to do. And she basically, unfortunately, was struggling with cancer at the time, and we lost her last April. But she was committed to this work and wanted some of her horses to come over and be part of this program.
Oh, that's beautiful.
So so we're kind of honoring Quincy in her memory and the horsemanship area in Kelseyville by having these horses. And we've also got goats coming up from Oakland, got therapy goats on their way, waiting for us to build the barn, Nigerian dwarf goats. that were used down there for going and working with people. And so these things just keep showing up.
Mm-hmm.
And that's
As
where
they
we're
do,
at the point where,
which is fabulous. So, and this, the GoFundMe page is specifically for the work that you're going to do with is it the Warrior Discovery Project, working with first responders and veterans, is that right?
yeah, that's exactly what we're going to do. I work for an organization, another one called Save a Warrior, and they do a 5.5 day long war detox program. And I've come on board with the equine. There's a full equine day, and I found that I'm really, really adaptable to that work. I love it. Mm. And they've got over 1,000 alumni now, and we want to kind of advance that. Mm. And also, we just know there's local, Lake County where we're at, per capita has more veterans than anywhere else in California. Wow. Mm-hmm. Which is really interesting too, which we didn't know when we moved here. Yeah, so we want to offer this work for that.
Mm-hmm. So how do people, give me the name of the GoFundMe page so people can find you.
I think it's called Healing with Horses.
That's right. Yes.
Mm-hmm. Right. Mm-hmm. There's more to that. Healing with Horses is
basically what they look for.
Veterans. Healing with Horses for veterans.
Yeah, for veterans. Yeah.
And even if they go to your Facebook page, that I'm sure there's a direct you direct people to the GoFundMe page on that too.
It's on our Facebook page, and I'm working on putting a link also on our website too. Not there yet. Yeah. Okay. A few things to do.
So tell me I love hearing stories of transformation. So tell me, besides your own, obviously, which is really touching and inspirational, but some of the other people that have come to you that were really, really struggling, and what transpired for them after working with you.
You know, one of the things I can really state to is like in the Save a Warrior Day, we have a full equine day, and there's usually 12 to 13 men or women going through that event, the transformational event. And so in 8 hours, I run 12 or 13 men or women through the round pen. Oh. And I want to have 20 to 30 minutes to be able to have them get something significant, to be able to change a huge insight. And I just find that I've had so many different instances where people have just walked in there and said, I don't see anything, or I'm terrified of horses, or this is, baloney. Mm-hmm. And within 5 to 10 minutes, all of a sudden, something shifted. Their thinking has settled, they've slowed down, and all of a sudden they have a major insight. And then they, as soon as they drop their story, immediately the horses come over to them.
Wow.
and that connection happens. And we've had people, a horse lay down in front of them, and then the person lay down next to the horse. We've had guys kneel and actually have the horse come up and just be working the top of their head, just working here, kind of blessing the top of their head. Guys would just fall to the ground, women fall to the ground wailing, and the horse would come up and just love on them up and down, all down their body, as they just let this grief go. And you can't make this stuff up. It's just incredible what happens when you allow their thinking to settle and all of a sudden be open to possibilities they haven't seen before.
And it's amazing to me, because I'm imagining some of the, the grief can be overwhelming, and the fact that the horses are not frightened by that or don't react to that, but just in a loving way, which makes me cry. Yeah. It's beautiful.
The interesting thing about horses is that they just want to know that you're authentic. Mm-hmm. I mean, if you're trying to cover something up, they don't trust you, because they'll feel the disconnection between what you're showing the world and what's really going on. If you're really expressive or just vulnerable and just staying with what's going on for you, they'll trust you, because otherwise they're like, what's this disconnect I feel? They're showing me a strong face, but inside I know something's going on. They'll feel it. And so they will literally trust you and want to connect with you, especially if there's no shield around you and you're just being true. Mm-hmm. And so the beautiful thing is that, we've had a couple-day programs here, and people have just, by showing up, exactly what they're working on will show itself in a round pen had people struggling with boundary issues that completely shows up, or connection, or, feeling like a fraud. There's been a lot of different situations, and the same horse will show up differently for whatever person's in with them, because they're mirroring back the person that they're working with at the moment.
Yeah. So. Horses are herd animals, and for survival, they have to connect. And so if you're not being vulnerable or authentic, they know that instantly by the energy you give off. And so then they don't want to connect with you because they don't trust you. Yeah. And so we allow our thinking to slow up. All of a sudden this authenticity comes through, and then instantly a horse that could be all the way across the round pen and not even looking that way will show right up and is right there with that person. And they really start talking from the heart and speaking from the heart.
Wow. It's I'm drawn to it. I mean, I had an experience when I was very little being kicked by a horse, so that's why I have a little bit of my, resistance. But listening to it, it sounds incredible. And yeah, if I find myself up there, I'm going to come and visit you.
Well, I was just going to say you'll have to come visit.
I will. So, do you offer other types of coaching besides the equine therapy coaching?
Yeah, we both do. I know that I've, been coaching for a while, and I'd say all of my coaching now is very wisdom based, three principles based. And whether I work with a lot of businesses in the Bay Area, a lot of entrepreneurs, and, a lot of people that are stuck. So sometimes people will just come up here for a couple of days to work together.
Beautiful.
Or I'll do a lot of virtual coaching as well. And I know Brad does as well.
Yeah, I've been trained in, as a grief facilitator, working with certified grief facilitator, working with men and women and teenagers for years and years. And then I'm also a trained shadow work facilitator, and also a 4 Gateways coach. Okay. And I've just been in all kinds of different modalities and work over the years, which is almost coming to 30 years. But there's something when I discovered almost 4 years ago, came across Michael Neal's book, Inside Out Revolution. In the third time reading it, I heard something in that book that changed me in a way that has continued to unfold ever since that time, and led to me going to Michael Neal's program and meeting Julie. And here we are.
Yeah. Well, obviously you heard something the first time to keep reading it 2 more times.
Yes. Yes, so, there was something there.
And so, is most, because I was thinking, I remember reading somewhere that, the trauma from being in combat is not just from the people that were in combat, but their families, especially when they've lost a family or, a loved one. Do you work with the families of first responders and military?
Yeah, we will. That's one of the areas that we want to kind of focus on. I know Julie wants to do work with mothers and daughters in that area, and just continue to know that as we continue to pull out this development about what trauma is really like in the culture, we're finding that it just isn't in combat or veterans or first responders, that a lot of people have experienced some kind of trauma from childhood. That doesn't get spoken about, that actually, which is underneath them, kind of resonating when they think that it's the trauma on top of it from their adult life that's going on. So there's pre-trauma, and then there's moral injury, which happens in our adulthood, and experience either downrange or on the streets. And that when that collapses on top of the pre-trauma, that becomes complex PTS. That's kind of a real simple way of describing it, but we're just finding that the more and more we start looking what's underneath the hood, the why underneath the why, all of a sudden things start showing up, and those are the areas that really need healing. And the horses are just a beautiful way added with the 3 principles. Seeing that a part of them is whole, perfect, and connected to everything.
Yeah. Now, going back to what you just said for a minute, did you say you did some shadow coaching as well?
Yeah, I did when I was after I retired, I was living in Colorado for a while, about 13 years. And I worked with the Men's Leadership Alliance, and Cliff Berry started something called Shadow Work, probably about 25 years ago. And it's a transformative ritual work process process work that I got trained in. And so that was a lot of the work I did back in those days. And there's something about being able to work with clients to be able to see that there's a part of us we keep in shadow, and that ends up being the trauma.
Yeah, exactly. The reason I ask is I trained as a shadow coach too, and that's, I think, why I love the principles so much, is because it's, and the same with shadow work, it's just reclaiming the shadow. Those are just all, disowned aspects of ourselves that we judge as bad and hide. And for me, there was a correlation with the principles, because it is so just about accepting our humanity. We're all doing the best we can, given the thinking we're having in the moment. And, we're not damaged, we're not broken, we're not irreparable. So I found that really dovetailed really well for me when I heard the principles. It was just even more and even better than what I had been doing.
Yeah, I really agree with that's exactly what really pulled me through these years. And what I loved about it when I saw it, we just have the story going on over the top of that, and we just keep pushing that story, hiding it under the water, like putting what do they call those balls that you blow up?
Oh, the big beach balls.
Yeah, beach ball. Yeah, and pretty soon we got 6 or 7 beach balls under the water because we don't want to let them out and be seen.
Yeah.
And there's so much energy in that we don't even realize it.
Exactly. You take your focus off it for a second and it bounces up and hits you in the face.
Exactly. Exactly. And we wonder, why did I yell at that person, or why did that happen when my child just came in and spilled a glass of water? What is all this?
Yeah.
And so it's very true.
So what other things, if you, I actually want to talk about one other thing that we've talked about, the post-traumatic stress and the grief and the loss. What, for some of our listeners that might not know this term, when you talk about moral injury, what is that exactly?
Moral injury is really starting to come into the forefront. The work with warriors and first responders is that something happens, a situation happens, and because of the way that it is, that it goes against our moral conscience. All of a sudden, you're finding there's an actual wound. And this wound really permeates on that somehow we may have been part of something that we didn't want it to go the way it did, or somebody got hurt or something happened. And then all of a sudden, it's almost like Dr. Ed Tick calls it like a soul wound. And we're finding the more we do this work on actually looking at the brain with PTS, the neuroplasticity, and actually looking at the different parts of the regions of the brain that are firing up for trauma, they're finding that there's this unspoken part about the moral injury, that it's the why, this thing underneath the thing that most of us won't talk about.
Yeah.
And just now, I think there's starting to be a conversation with this about the moral injury thing. That's really starting to affect our conversations with warriors and first responders and anybody that's had some kind of deep trauma in their lives.
I think that's so wonderful, because I think, again, that points to what we were just talking about with the shadow. We have shame around something and then we hide it, and then it just starts to fester. And it's easy sometimes to see a physical wound or the physical effects of war, but the hidden damage and scarring that's done is just. I'm so glad it's getting more attention on it, because I think those are the things that are so painful. It's what we struggle with.
Yeah, I think the VA, after almost, we're coming up on close to 20 years with these wars going on, and the VA is basically run into the wall in some ways about trying to figure out what's going on. They've already thrown so much pills at it, so many different other kind of therapies, that they're really looking at the understanding that there's something on top of this PTS.
Yeah.
And I love that. We love that, number one, the principles helps lift that away with this understanding that part of us is whole, perfect, and connected to everything.
Yeah.
And that the horses help accelerate this connection part, that we end up armoring our hearts up so much because of the moral injury. And because they just keep wanting to connect, and we want to connect, even though we can't put the words to what happened. But once that physical connection in the energy field of the horse starts to happen, then all of a sudden, there it is. And there's healing. And it's usually unmourned grief. is underneath it all.
Yeah, well, that's beautiful, and the work that you do is amazing. And so just to recap for a minute, so people can either come to you for one-day programs or individual sessions or do a series. How does it work?
Yes, yes, and yes.
Yes.
We're still, we don't have a lot right now that's really standardized. And what I've always done, even before meeting Brad, is everything I've done is customized for the person. And, because we're still getting in the barn, hopefully up this spring, and we're starting to put some programs together. And we're open to seeing what works for people. We're exploring and seeing, we want to meet life where it wants to meet us, right? And help people where we can. Yeah. So I would say just reach out and we can create what seems to be most beneficial for people.
Yeah, that's beautiful. That's definitely a lovely invitation, and you're certainly in the right place. It's the photos of the ranch are just stunning, and it sounds like you also are in a community that needs you very much. So wonderful synchronicity there. Well,
we think we need them just as much as they need us.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
it's very true.
Well, thank you so much for coming on today, and good luck with your GoFundMe, and anybody out there that can see the incredible impact that this work has. I encourage you to push that donate button.
Thank you, Dale. Appreciate it. Honor and privilege to be on your show.
Thank you so much.